Okay, well, welcome back, everyone. I, I know we started this class on some topic, but the 2 weeks off, I've kind of forgotten. Does anybody remember what? Okay, so I guess it's some sort of history thing. And I thought I had this thing pop up on a social media, and I thought, it might be interesting to reintroduce history.
Dostoevsky once said, "People don't want truth. They want comfort dressed as truth." And also Kafka said, "Reality is too heavy for most people to carry. So they borrow illusions, soft dreams, sweet lies, and call it happiness." So the question is, do you want comfort or do you want the truth? Dostoevsky once said,
Okay,
"People don't want truth."
uh, I this is not going to give you comfort. So we're back. We're looking at the role that capitalism has played in generating warfare, and it's not about capitalism doing it. It's the system of capitalism that can be used many different ways, but the process of uh, uh, makes possible great earnings, great income, great wealth, great power. And to do that often requires access to resources to make that happen. And it's through that that we get into warfare. Um, at the In the 18th century, there was another point of dramatic milestone in the human experience. And that milestone is the discovery of coal, steam, and new technology giving us machinery. And it all begins in England.
These were Britain's fledgling capitalists, and love them or hate them, they would change the way that we lived and worked forever.
This is Neath in Wales. In 1700, this was the site of a coal mining complex run by a budding capitalist, Humphrey Mackworth. With Bible in one hand and clock in the other, he wanted a return on the investment he'd made here, buying the land and installing mining equipment. He had to change the way his miners worked.
Previously, people would be paid piece rates. Mow that area of land for such and such an amount of money. Thresh that quarter of grain, I'll pay you so much. This is now, and people could do it very much in their own time. Now what is driving the investor, the entrepreneur, is to get a regular workforce turning up daily at set times.
Mackworth wanted his employees to work 6 days a week for a salary and to turn up to work on time. The miners weren't interested. But unlike the cliched exploiter, Mackworth responded with carrots rather than sticks. He offered his men sick pay, pensions, and greatly increased salaries. Protestant capitalists like Mackworth were sowing the seeds of our way of working. What drove them was a belief that making money had a higher moral purpose. A friend of Mackworth's wrote,
"The poor miners and labourers should have some small share with you in so rich a treasure. They have spent their lives to make you rich, and they should have a comfortable subsistence provided for them. This will bring you a blessing from heaven."
Demand for coal was so high that Mackworth's mines were highly profitable, even if the policy of offering high wages could backfire spectacularly.
Often high wages lead to these workers taking more time off. So you get a vicious circle. The more you pay them, the less they're willing to work. because they satisfy their basic needs of consumption, their food, and look after their families. And beyond that, they think, well, do I want to go to work today, or shall I take a day off? So you see them expanding their purchases. They're buying ribbons, buckles, mirrors, furniture for their houses, but they're not fully converted. And the reason for this is that the goods they're buying are still rather expensive.
It would take 100 years or more for workers to be persuaded that full-time employment was worthwhile. And for that to happen, somehow, more goods had to be made more quickly and more cheaply. And the country that got there first would lead the world into the modern age.
Since Britain had become an island back in the Stone Age, it had been the muscle of man and beast, with a little bit of help from running water and strong winds that had powered the country. But then, 8,000 years later, in a corner of the West Midlands near Dudley, one man realised a dream that would change all that forever.
This contraption, built by an ironmonger called Thomas Newcomen in 1712, was the first time heat and steam were harnessed usefully. It pumped water at 120 gallons a minute out of coal mines. As the seventh age of Britain came to a close, God, it seemed, had found a new purpose for her people: to go forth and prosper.
At this time, while they're introducing new technology, they are also, let me get that up correctly, England is also on a quest to end slavery. Doesn't really happen till the 19th century, but there's a movement. It's the evangelicals in England, who were the same people who influenced the American Revolution with its action in the James Somerset case, which we talked about. So even though England is looking for more raw materials and is going to exploit its strength in being able to do that, it's also working to try to end slavery. Now, what happens is, as they're ending slavery, they say, look, we have a substantial infrastructure, business infrastructure in Africa that is working the African slave trade. We want to see what other things we can use that infrastructure for. Instead of trading for slaves, what other things can we trade for? But they don't really know anything about Africa. Even though we have this impression that the white people invaded Africa and stole black people and took them away. It's not really what happens. They've tried to penetrate from time to time, but they couldn't do it. So they were trading mostly on the coast. And but now they want to find out what's there. So they use missionaries to go into Africa, try to convert people, bring them whatever religions they want to bring them, and develop intelligence about what else is there. Dr. Livingstone goes as a missionary, and he discovers this is a resource-rich continent and can be very important for feeding the Industrial Revolution. He stays there quite a while, but he eventually gets lost and loses communications. A journalist, Stanley, goes off looking for him, finds him, writing reports about what Dr. Livingstone has found. Livingstone dies. Stanley wants to continue his work, and he thinks England is going to support him, but they're not really that keen on it. King Leopold in Belgium, however, really does want to know about what's going on there, and he becomes the source of funding. Let's take a look at the conquest of Africa, what is known today as the scramble for Africa. This is the flashpoint for World Wars I and II.
During the last quarter of the 19th century, the European powers were facing economic crises and national rivalries, but continued to dream of an African empire. The Berlin Conference established free trade on the Congo and Niger rivers, and laid down the principles and rules for dividing up African territory in the name of civilization. This led to a race for territorial domination, whether by negotiation or by military conquest. By 1914, some 40 European colonies had been established, and only Liberia and Ethiopia remained independent. France established a vast empire in northwest Africa, covering the Federation of French West Africa, obtained by victories over dogged African resistance. The Federation of French Equatorial Africa, established a bit later. And the Maghreb, where it imposed a protectorate on Morocco after bitter disputes with Germany, which took Cameroon as compensation. In addition, Djibouti, the Somali coast, and Madagascar became French colonies. Following agreement on the partition of Africa, Great Britain, France's principal rival, proceeded to consolidate its colonies in West Africa. However, the British Empire in Africa laid mainly in Eastern and Southern Africa. Victorious in the terrible Boer War, Great Britain annexed the Afrikaner states to create the Union of South Africa. Despite victory over the Mahdists and the favorable issue of the Fashoda incident, Great Britain was unable to establish a transcontinental link from the Cape to Cairo because of the various territories held by Germany and Portugal. Spain was present in Morocco, Rio de Oro, and Guinea. In 1908, Belgium purchased the Congo from King Leopold II. Italy, a late arrival in the race, failed to conquer Ethiopia, but took control of Libya in 1911. During the First World War, the belligerent powers drew on its African colonies for men and raw materials. The German colonies were attacked by the French and British, who after their victory in Europe set about dividing the German Empire between them, backed by mandates from the League of Nations. Deaf to protest movements, European colonial imperialism triumphed as a rationale for power during the 1930s world crisis.
When in studying the world wars, I'm not sure when it began, but for me, I was in probably high school, and I was curious, what was the cause of the world wars? I had learned about the killing of the Archduke Ferdinand in Serbia, and I thought, imagine that, a small event like that combust into worldwide war. Then I kept digging deeper, and I stumbled upon the scramble for Africa. And I realized, what? Why didn't they teach us about this before? Because this was really the friction that eventually erupts in Serbia. But that was just a spark. The fumes, the gases were already there waiting to explode. let's take a look at what happens when Livingston passes.
Africa, the dark continent of the early explorers, became the stage for the final act in the story of Queen Victoria's empire. In the footsteps of missionaries like David Livingstone, the powers of Europe conducted a brutal race for colonies. In Britain, this last burst of expansion was inspired by two men whose stories would bring the British people to a climax of imperialistic fervor. The first, General Charles Gordon. Sent on a diplomatic mission to a poor Arab country, he launched a personal crusade to free an oppressed people. His defiant stand would draw his queen and her empire into a holy war and lead them on a romantic but violent quest to impose a new world order. The second, Cecil John Rhodes, started out as a simple cotton farmer, and he became the greatest empire builder of his generation. To fund his dreams of conquest, he embarked on a ruthless pursuit of diamonds, gold, and power that made him the most formidable and the most hated man in Africa. Between them, Cecil Rhodes and Charles Gordon exemplified the virtues and the vices of their age. They would lead the British to new heights of glory, and they would expose the dark underside of Victoria's empire.
And that colonization continues on, so what we're seeing is what colonization is empire building. Colonization means invasion, occupation, murder, rape, and theft.
In 1914, the European colonial empires attained a considerable dimension. The British Empire is the vastest, covering more than 30 million square kilometers. The French Empire comes in second, with 10 million square kilometers. Germany and Italy, whose colonial policies are late, have a presence mainly in Africa. Belgium is present in the Congo. The Netherlands and Portugal preserve a part of their empires from preceding centuries. The largest part of Indonesia for the Netherlands. Angola and Mozambique for Portugal. Spain, for its part, lost, in the course of the 19th century, almost the entirety of its immense colonial empire, and is present only in Rio de Oro and in northern Morocco. Finally, Russia developed, at its borders, an empire in Central Asia and the Far East. This territorial takeover is justified, in the eyes of the Europeans, by the pursuit of economic advantage, and by their conviction of carrying out a civilizing mission. It also enables the states to affirm their power and glorify their sense of national pride. From 1880, colonial expansion accelerates rapidly, and competition among European powers generates crises at Fashoda between France and the United Kingdom, in Central Asia between the United Kingdom and Russia, or in Morocco between Germany and France. For all that, the European cooperation, which manifested itself in the tone of several international conferences, avoided the worsening of the crises.
So, we're today looking at a war in Iran, and if he and it's about nuclear weapons. We can't let them have nuclear weapons. It's about a radical regime. We've got to change the regime. We get and the same thing happened with the war in Iraq. This is about dictatorships. This is about jobs. This is about oil. We keep, we get all these reasons. The reason fundamentally is greed. And I think it's important for us to recognize that at some point. King Leopold and by the way, last week, 3 weeks ago, Dave asked what happened to King Leopold, and I mistakenly said that he was tried at the International Criminal Court. He was not. He was subsequent to his, being on the throne. He was subject to litigation and had to pay a lot of reparations and that sort of thing. But King Leopold, talking about the mid-19th century, he knows that Africa has a lot of stuff and he wants it. But he operates under an umbrella of the International African Association. This is an association that is formed to take a stand against the illegal slave trade. The slave trade itself was already coming under attack, where it had to, people had to stop, make it illegal. But then when it's illegal, there's still trafficking going on. In fact, we still have trafficking going on today. So King Leopold, under the disguise of wanting to bring civilization and goodness to the people of Africa, is really looking to get in there and take their stuff. Let's take a look at the king.
White conquest is mythologized as benevolence, as bringing civilization to the Congo.
Cet endroit laisse un sentiment étrange, un mélange de gêne, de surprise et d'incrédulité. Partout revient le même message. Au Congo, les Belges n'ont fait que de bonnes choses, de très bonnes choses. Ce message à usage interne s'adresse aussi au monde extérieur et dit en substance ceci: reconnaissez donc l'œuvre civilisatrice de Léopold II au Congo. Reconnaissez la légitimité de la présence belge au Congo.
On m'accuse d'avoir fait fusiller un indigène, ligoté à un arbre. Je suis également accusé d'avoir mené une attaque contre un village, au cours de laquelle beaucoup de Noirs ont été tués. On m'accuse d'ailleurs, ainsi que 5 autres Blancs, d'avoir tué 150 personnes, d'avoir pendu en forme de croix des femmes et des enfants, ainsi que d'avoir coupé les organes génitaux et les têtes d'hommes pour les attacher aux palissades.
There is no doubt that a lot of things happened in Congo Free State under King Leopold II that are clearly unacceptable, that are even scandalous. But one has to look at the sign of the times, and sort of none of the colonial powers in those days were really softies and had a fairly human approach. I mean, you only look at what the Brits and the French and the Dutch who introduced slave trade, or the Germans were doing. So it's not a period of which we can be very proud, but one has to look at it in a particular perspective of time and of history.
Victoria and Uncle Albert on a visit to London. They did have 3 daughters. Their son died young, so there was no surviving male heir. At the start of his reign, Leopold proclaimed, "My ambition is to make Belgium greater, stronger, and more beautiful." He had no doubts that the country needed improving.
Leopold did always complain that Belgium was a small country with small people, but he certainly wasn't a small king. I mean, not only was he extremely tall, but I think he had enormous ambitions for himself. And I think he felt resentment about his relatively low and humble role within the Saxe-Coburg dynasty. I mean, he really wasn't very important compared with Victoria, compared with the Kaiser. And I think that he therefore felt that personally, if you like. I mean, he was somebody for whom l'État was definitely c'est moi, and therefore the elevation of Belgium was necessarily the elevation of himself.
Like his father, Leopold believed that having a colony was the way to achieve greatness. Leopold I made over 50 attempts to get a colony, all to no avail. His son was going to be more successful. Even before Leopold became king, he had sent the Belgian finance minister a piece of marble from the Acropolis inscribed, "Belgium must have a colony."
Leopold II leefde in de tweede helft van de 19e eeuw. En in feite was hij 100 jaar achter op de ideeën. Engeland, of Groot-Brittannië als je wil, Frankrijk, Nederland, op dat moment in het laatste kwartaal van de 19e eeuw, dachten unaniem dat een kolonie geen geld moest opbrengen op de eerste plaats voor het moederland, maar dat het moederland zelf moest geld investeren en met de winst die daar gemaakt werden ter plaatse moest houden voor de administratie, voor het leger, voor de ordehandhaving en voor de inlandse bevolking. En nu Leopold II dacht er helemaal niet aan. Het moest geld opbrengen voor het moederland en niet vice versa.
Leopold set about buying his new colony. He tried Sarawak, the New Hebrides, the Fiji Islands, and the Philippines, until there was practically nowhere else left for him to look, apart from one place. At the start of Leopold's reign, the Congo was unknown territory to Europeans. For Leopold, it represented his last chance. The Congo was to be his new colony, at any cost. The man who was going to make this possible was Henry Morton Stanley. A former workhouse boy from Wales, he had made himself into one of the greatest explorers of the age and one of the roughest. His expedition to cross Africa from east to west was the most expensive ever undertaken. Stanley, coming from the east, was getting into the Congo through the back door. No white man had ever crossed the continent before. Stanley would have to walk or canoe 7,000 miles. Leopold knew that if Stanley succeeded, he would effectively open up the Congo. In the 19th century, London was the epicenter of colonization. At Claridge's, Leopold entertained explorers, geographers, and generals, all to sell his Congo venture. He went to see his Aunt Victoria and gave the Queen more of the same spin. He told her, "I have sought to meet those most interested in bringing civilization to Africa." Back home, he organized a geographical conference, turning his palace into a luxury hotel for the delegates and supervising every detail. He declared that his aims in Africa were completely charitable and philanthropic. The Congo was about to receive all the benefits of civilization and Christianity.
Meteen ook, omdat hij hier in een christelijk land zat, was dat ook maar goed meegenomen dat hij daar dan meteen wel het christendom wilde helpen propageren. Alhoewel wij toch weten dat hij zo geen overtuigd christen was. Maar goed, dat is een persoonlijke zaak.
By 1884, the great powers were all lined up in Berlin to hand over the Congo to the king. No Africans were invited.
Ce document, c'est l'acte général de la conférence du Congo, publié le 26 février 1885 à Berlin. Ce document est connu dans l'histoire comme étant l'acte général de la conférence de Berlin. Léopold II, roi de Belge, n'était pas présent à Berlin.
The conference gave Leopold everything he wanted.
It's very remarkable to see that King Leopold managed to trick the great powers at that time. He promised that everybody would have access to that, there would be free trade, that if there was anything to be gained, that everybody could participate in the loot. And there was quite some remorse afterwards in other countries that he got away with it. But he did.
Le Congo est à peine reconnu par les grandes puissances comme propriété personnelle de Léopold II que le roi met en branle sa machine infernale. Dès le 1er juillet 1885, un décret stipule que toutes les terres vacantes, sont propriété de l'État. En 91 et en 92, d'autres décrets vont déclarer les produits de la forêt appartenant exclusivement à l'État. Et les indigènes ne peuvent pas les exploiter, sauf pour l'État. Donc, en un tour de main, Léopold II a dépouillé les Africains de tous leurs biens et transformé le Congo en un vaste camp de travail forcé.
At first, the missionaries wrote privately to each other about the cruelties they had seen traveling around their areas. But after a while, they started writing to their home missions.
The poor people are crying out against the cruel oppression of the state, and well they might. I can scarcely keep my tongue silent when I hear of and see such villainy. We are 700 miles from the coast, and the officers act as though they had a free hand and could do as they please. Their conduct is bringing disgrace on the name of civilization.
The first mission station in Leopold's Congo was at Bolengi on the equator, where Stanley had established his first post, and it was not Belgian. British and American Protestant missionaries were making the running in the race for Congolese souls, and they were less likely to keep quiet. In 1895, a missionary on leave in London did go public, but was forced to remain anonymous. He feared for his safety when he went back. By now, the missionaries knew all too well the severity of the punishments the state handed out. They saw how villagers were flogged with a shikot, a whip made of rhinoceros hide dried in the sun till it could rip a man's skin to shreds. They saw men tortured to death with burning copal. A missionary described how the soldier found horrible pleasure in pouring the copal over a prisoner's head.
La potence est dressée. La corde est attachée trop haut. On soulève le moricaud et on lui passe le nœud coulant. La corde tourne pendant quelques instants, puis craque. L'individu est à terre qui gigote. Un coup de feu dans la nuque et le tour est joué. Pas la moindre impression cette fois. Et dire que la première fois que j'ai vu administrer de la chicotte, j'en ai pâli d'effroi. L'Afrique a du bon tout de même. J'irai au feu maintenant comme à une noce.
Soon, one of the missionaries at Bolengi reached the point where he had to go public. What he had come across went beyond anything he had ever imagined. His reports first appeared in a missionary magazine, but soon found their way into national newspapers in Europe. The Reverend Sjöblom was the man who first revealed to the world the state practice of cutting off hands.
When I crossed the stream, I saw some dead bodies hanging down from the branches in the water. As I turned my face away at the horrible sight, one of the native corporals who was following us down said, "Oh, that's nothing. A few days ago I returned from a fight and I brought the white man 160 hands, and they were thrown into the river. That was about the time that I saw a native killed with my own eyes. The soldier said, "Don't take it to heart so much. They kill us if we don't bring the rubber." The commissioner has promised us that if we have plenty of hands, he will shorten our service. I have brought in plenty of hands already, and I expect my service will soon be finished.
Leopold's soldiers were being ordered to cut off the right hands of dead bodies. Each soldier...
So I wanted to show you all of that in the Congo because it highlights the level of brutality that was being waged in service of obtaining raw materials to feed the industrial machine. Yes, it is capitalism that is doing that, but it's the capitalist system that's using those raw materials to become very wealthy. But it's not capitalism that does it. It's the greedy people operating that system.
was issued a fixed number of cartridges before a raid, and to prove to the white officers that he hadn't waited.
Sorry, got the wrong one there. Back to here. Let me just take that out. Then come back to here. Here. Here.
Baringa Province, northeastern Congo. A land controlled by Belgium's King Leopold. British missionary Alice Harris will harness the power of mass communication to reveal a terrible truth. A catalogue of horror.
Our mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, beaten and murdered for rubber. No matter how hard we work, we suffer. Every day we suffer.
It's a story repeated through the ages. Colonial forces attack native populations and plunder the planet's riches. Atrocities committed far from prying eyes. Harris wants to change that. She'll tell the world what is happening in the Congo. That children are routinely maimed as a warning to villagers. Her weapon, a camera. For the first time, mankind can capture images of our world, reproduce and share them. The first cameras weighed 110 pounds. By 1900, they're smaller, portable, and in the hands of 2 million amateurs.
The invention of photography and the means to get them in front of people held more power than its inventors ever dreamed. Photos don't blink, and they don't go away. Once you've seen that image, you can't rewind.
Harris takes hundreds of photos in the Congo. They're published.
Okay, well, I think you get the point is that it's that competition, that fight for control, power, dominance, so that they had access to the resources of those lands, can feed it into their industrial system, making the 1% extraordinarily wealthy. Okay, Dave.
Okay. Please use the raise your hand function to ask one succinct question, and then and so everybody can go. I got a question about the French. The French in the in the colony, well, in North America, seem to be comparatively nice people compared to the British. How were the French in Africa 100 years later?
Yeah, the general assessment of the French in the colonies of North America gives them a better public relations than the British or the Spanish, certainly. Certainly they come in here after the Spanish, but the people who come are those who are primarily interested in fur trading. So they're more apt to want to make friends with the natives, so the natives can help them go find the furs that they want to trade. But they also do some pretty terrible things too. When it came down to the natives having to decide who was the lesser of two evils, they decided it was the French, which is why we have the French-Indian War. But certainly France has a lot, they were active in the slave trade and all that goes with it. So yeah, they have a history of brutality just as the Brits do. Yeah. With a lot of these, it's who's the more evil? When you start trying to compare that, it's like, it doesn't really make a difference. There's, you have invasion, occupation going on, and it's pretty horrific. Look at what the French did in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. It was every much as horrible as King Leopold. So I think it's this phenomenon that becomes a part of the human experience after we become agriculturalized. That Neolithic period, that transition in our existence was dramatic, and I think we're making progress in in becoming more more human. And I think a lot of it is out of the creation of international institutions that can hold people accountable and set the boundaries and barriers for behavior. Each time we have someone who says, no, we got to get rid of all of that. We need less rules. We need less regulations. Ipso facto, Viktor Orban. Look at the result. It's a catastrophe. And people go, oh, yeah, that's right. That's bad. Let's throw that bum out. It's...
No le interesaba por el turtleneck.
Okay. Warren?
Here. So, Sal, of course, we know about King Leopold and that he was a particular driver in terms of that cruelty and that drive for the Belgium nation, not necessarily the people, but the nation, because he represents the government. But was there, or I guess I'm not quite sure how to ask this. In each of these regimes, was there a particular driver like that, or was it just more of a groupthink thing that maybe somebody said it out loud and yeah, that's what we want to do. We want to go in and take over those people and make their lives as terrible as possible. So I'm just quite I'm kind of wondering about how the thinking gets there, because if you pointed out to us in numerous classes that humans aren't really built for, um, taking each other out necessarily, but we definitely have proven that when, you know, with certain forces in place, that we can certainly do that. And we've seen that recently here with our ICE officers taking such extreme measures that the rest of the populace is like, what the heck are you doing, man? And so I was just wondering how that these different nations got to that point.
Yeah, it's difficult to imagine what life is like before industrialization and what life is like after. It's difficult to, place ourselves in the time frame of when we were just hunter-gatherers and what life was like. And so as we progress through those stages and we arrive at the Industrial Revolution, the machinery that I showed in one of the first clips, this contraption now allows us to do this, that, and the other thing. These were extraordinary development. This was the equivalent of flying to the back parking lot on the moon. These were huge events. And now the people who really understood it were those who had already gathered a degree of power and wealth. And what they see is, we can make a fortune out of this. I already have a fortune, but I want another fortune. It's kind of like Dave asked before the class, I can't figure out what's going on with the stock market. Again, it's the few who recognize artificial intelligence may be another inflection point of the human experience, that it will change everything. And they want to be there to capitalize on it, to get the wealth that will be generated from that. So what you have is, at this point, again, it's the elites, the people who are in a position to know here's what this new technology is going to mean.
So Belgium was a little different in that it had one major driver, and what you're saying is the other countries had kind of this almost cabal of people.
Well, they join in because, remember, they witnessed what happened in the New World, and some of them were slow to get into it and didn't really understand, but they learned a lot of lessons from the New World, which is don't wait, get in there. So when you take Africa, mid 19th century, there's not many colonies, right? They've now learned about industrialization over about 100 years, less, for things didn't spread as quickly. But once they knew it, then they were going by the end of the 19th century, 90% of Africa is colonized. So it's this, enormous rush. And then there's tensions between them. So it eventually erupts into the world wars. It's not about, one crazy man, Adolf Hitler. He is so utterly unimportant
He's
to
more,
what.
so you're saying he's like more of a symptom than a catalyst per se.
He's a puppet. He's
Uh,
a puppet for the people of power. He's the front man.
Hey, we can't think of any real world examples of that
Right.
now.
Right. Right. No, it's like with all of the, wars that we've had over the past 50 years, Iraq, Afghanistan, invading Panama, all that stuff. It's not about what they reported on the news. And that's not saying the news people aren't doing their job. They're basing it on what they're being told, and they're relaying that. But it's all BS. Follow the money. Follow the money. Follow the power. It's nonsense. It's like the attack on 9/11. We automatically jump into, we're going to go fight them back. We don't really look at why'd they do that. Well, they did that for good reason. They were provoked. and if you don't deal with the provocation, then you're not really looking to solve anything. All you want to do is flex your muscle. And you're not dealing with
Africa
the
didn't have
problem.
any means for fighting back, I'm guessing, really.
Was that, I'm sorry?
Africa didn't really have any means for fighting back. I can not imagine that they were particularly happy.
Well, understand these things emerge over a period of time, and it doesn't happen at one moment. It's kind of like right now. Is it too late to save the American government? I mean, I don't know, but I do know this. I do know that there are forces that are formidable that want to end America. So, if it is true and it comes to fruition, when we finally realize it, will be too late. The Native
Steve
Americans.
Bannon has said that outright on numerous occasions.
The Native Americans, mind you, it's Pontiac who starts to want to pull the Indian nations together to fight against the white people. This is after the French-Indian War. It's too late. It's too late. So the clock is ticking on us, and there may come a point when it will be too late. So, you've had very powerful forces running campaigns, very sophisticated campaigns, to make people, to drive a wedge between Americans and America. And that's been successful.
Well, I haven't been succinct, but we'll let Lou Booze take over here.
And resolve all our issues.
I think you've been tiptoeing and skirting what my question is, because looking at what took place over the centuries with for natural resources and so forth, and now look what we have with an administration that is going after oil in Venezuela, now going after oil in Iran, and I wanted to go up to get the rare minerals out of Greenland. I was looking forward to your commentary, and you're starting to give it, I think, about what's happening today and how it is different from or similar to what took place as you just went through in your early presentation.
No, look, Trump didn't come up with the idea to get the oil, right? He He wanted the oil people to put money into his campaign, and he said, "I'm going to deliver for you." He he doesn't even know really if what he's delivering is all that important. You know, the Argentina oil isn't all that great. So, I mean, but he's just going with what do those, the people with real power, what will please them? The AI people, they know they've got to have the stuff that's in the ground in places like Africa, lithium and cobalt and copper, right? They know that they got to have that. And so, you know, those people in power, they're not looking at Trump as being someone who's going to disrupt their fueling their natural resources. They look at him as a puppet. They can kind of direct him wherever they want him to go. You know, and so yeah, I think we're living through the very similar things right now. Look, I mean, why does Russia want Ukraine? Yes, Vladimir has in his head to recreate the Russian Empire. But Ukraine has been the breadbasket of that area of the world for a long time, which means it's got a lot of resources. And they have, you know, a lot of lithium and stuff like that that's going to be very important for, you know, electric vehicles and batteries and all of that stuff. So, again, follow the money. And if you look at it from the production standpoint, which I know you do, Lou, and that is this company needs these base materials to make that product. So where are those base materials? And then you see people, you know, already competing to get to it. I was at a, I'm sorry, but I did want, I was at a you know, different talks that I go to, and it was about not the Congo, what's right next to it, Zimbabwe, and the resources that are there. One of the people who came to speak was an American businessman who's there to go and extract cobalt. And talking about how good it is to do business with this country. Not that it's not good to do business with it, but I'm just saying is that the people who know the ingredients that are necessary are well on top of where it is and how to get it.
But unfortunately, with what is going on right now and cutting off all the research and activity for EV and this type of thing, it's putting the U.S. back decades and decades behind the world. Look what China is now doing with the EV, you know, and we're not even allowed to say electric vehicle, let alone battery, nor diversity, equity, and inclusion. So there we are.
Look, it's like I say, there can come a point where we finally realize the problem and it's too late. You know, you can't buy another 20 years of research, right? That should have been going on. I mean, the things that were gutted by Doge were, it's complete insanity. Why would people in the East want to break up NATO? Because if China or somebody else wants something from a region and they can't get it through friendly interactions, and they want to get aggressive, well, if NATO doesn't exist, it becomes a lot easier to be aggressive.
Yeah.
And so there, I mean, to me, why would you, you know, America has been successful through the 20th century because Russia fought a war for us. Russia fought World War II. And at the end of World War II, after all these people, they just bludgeoned each other, we remained relatively unscathed. And we refined our manufacturing processes so that we provided 70% of the war materials to all our allies. We were fine when they were all gutted and left in rubble. If you wanted to buy a radio, where the hell are you going to go? You had to buy it from America. Whatever it was, a refrigerator, whatever, television, whatever it was you wanted, a car, you had to buy it from America because we were the only game in town. So we did really very well, and we had pretty good public relations because we did, did a lot of good. But the forces that wanted to destruct that, they know that wasn't going to happen overnight. It was going to take a long-term plan, and they were right. Mind you, the Project 2025 stuff, as it comes into being and people get angry, right? This is what the Koch and his friends said in 1950. We have to do our stuff underground because the American people will never buy into what we want.
Right.
And that's what they did.
Yeah. It's interesting. You mentioned 2025, and Orban and his crew had a lot to do with that information. Most of those, they did a test run on all the suppression that they did in Hungary, and that appears in 2025 articles too.
Look, all of these things by the autocrats, by the tyrants. If we look at Kansas, remember Kansas? You had the guy who was a senator, Brownback. Brownback was a senator talking about how we got to get rid of the American government. He was a voice for the Coke machine. Coke from Kansas as well. Brownback then leaves the Senate and becomes the governor of Kansas. And Kansas goes down the tube. And I mean, it's a catastrophe. And then they clean them out and start over again. But it's and Orban really is the Brownback of Hungary. And so we're going through those things, but by the time it comes to loggerheads and we have to reckon with what we have, the question then becomes, is it too late? Same for Hungary right now. Is it too late for Hungary? We're going to see.
On the subject of what we're going to see, what are we going to see next week?
Next week, I can't remember now. I think we go, well, let me just see here. Hang on. We go to China. Next week, we're going to look at China and what happens with the World War there. Many Americans forget China was one of our key allies in World War II. That the war actually begins in China. And a guy who deserves a lot of praise from America is Chiang Kai-shek. because he has to fight. He has to fight against the Japanese. He has to fend off the Russians, and he has to fend off Mao. And he does it, but it is not easy. And but we're going to get into that in some detail. I want to examine, because in this class was really, my thought was I want to do it about World War II and the scramble for Africa. And so, but I wanted to take it more from what happens in Asia than what happens in Europe, because we know so much about what's happened in the European theater.
If everybody can unmute and give Sal a warm applause for
Yes.
another exciting yeah.
Or,
Thank you,
or a
Sal.
box of Kleenex, whichever.
Yes.
Okay, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you for coming.
See you next weekend. Next week.
You.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sal.
Thank you.